Always a pause. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Branching Out. Hope you are comfortable. Tonight we are joined by a very, very special person, Jonathan. No, we're joined by the Bishop Rachel tonight. I believe actually is it Lord Bishop Rachel? Technically, is that the
Oh, just call me Rachel.
just call you Rachel? That's fine. So we're joined by Rachel, who happens to be a bishop. And we're going to chat to her a little bit later. Although, feel free to chip in whenever you want, Rachel. And tonight we're going to just kind of have a free flowing conversation. If you watched any of our other branching outs, we are completely live. It's completely unedited and uncut. So watch what you say, Jonathan.
Anything could happen.
Yeah, anything could happen. Yeah. In fact, my children made an appearance last week. So I hope that doesn't happen this week. But thank you for joining us. I'm aware this might actually be, for a lot of young people, their first week back at school and at college potentially. So I hope you've had a good week. I hope it's not been too arduous. It's been my little girl's first week at school, her first week at school. Yeah, and she's loved it. We had a bit of tears this morning, but she'll be all right.
Was that from you or from her, David?
Well, almost from me. I had to drop her off this morning and did the whole say goodbye to her, then go in and just kind of shove her in the door and leave before she started crying again. It was quite a brutal moment, but I watched her through the window. She started colouring in, and she was fine then. But if you've started school this week, or have gone up a school, or started college, I hope it's gone really well. In fact, if you have, drop a comment into the comments, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, and let us know. And we will, if you've got a little story from your first week at school as well, let us know. Now, this week, you'll notice Rosie's not here as well.
Yeah.
Rosie is not here. She is officially on maternity leave. Do you have any news, Jonathan? Do you know? I haven't contacted her at all. I'm terrible.
Rosie, hello. It's not that we didn't want to contact you. We are thinking of you. No, I've heard nothing at all. So, Rosie, if you are watching with your feet up, either with a baby in your arms or still not in your arms, politely put. Say hi and how you doing, and have you gone into labour yet?
Yeah, and if you're not watching, shame on you.
Yes. I thought we were friends.
Rosie isn't here, so there is no one to curb the terrible jokes that me and Jonathan are going to
I'll do my best.
There we go. And so, welcome. Now, story of the week has fallen to me this week, and there's a lot of stuff going on in the news. If you switch the news on this week, it's probably been fairly doom and gloom. But I managed to find somebody who has achieved something incredible. This guy, Dr. Radcliffe, he is a vet and he works in Namibia. He's one of those vets that goes out into the wilderness and tranquilizes massive animals and makes them better. Robin Radcliffe is his name, and he won an IG Nobel Prize. So it's a bit like a funny spoof version of the actual Nobel Prizes. For things that are so niche or so strange that people probably don't ever hear of it. So he won this prize for researching what happens when you hang rhinos upside down with their feet. So he went in. He was in Namibia and he tranquilized 12 rhinos and hung them upside down from cranes by their feet to research what would happen to them. And that might sound quite cruel and quite bizarre, but it isn't.
Okay.
In Namibia and a lot of countries where rhinos live, they quite often transport them by helicopter to different grazing areas and to different parts of the country where they need to move them around. I'm sure there's some sort of science to that, way above my. But they tranquilize them and lie them on their sides on pallet crates, like the pallets that you get. I don't know. Well, I've never had anything delivered on a pallet. Some people might have things delivered on pallets, and they'd fly them off and drop them, and nobody had ever stopped to think, how do we is lying a rhino on its side good or bad for it? So Robin Radcliffe thought, well, if we hang them by their feet, is that better than putting them on these pallets? So he did this research and found out it is significantly better to hang a rhino by its feet than it is to sit it on a pallet. So Rylan, good evening. Thank you for tuning in. Rylan's just dropped us a comment to say hello. Rylan, next time you fly a rhino across the Forest of Dean, make sure you hang it by its feet and not on a pallet, okay?
Yeah.
I wonder if it works the same for a deer and,
Well,
you
a
know,
wild boar maybe, yeah.
Wild boar, yeah, the Forest of Dean, yeah. That
Can I just say now that Rachel has said that, please, nobody go out there and try this, okay? You have to be a qualified vet with doctor in front of your name before you start grabbing deer or boar.
I think, Jonathan, it's even more. It's even more basic than that. I think you have to be able to fly a helicopter.
Well, yeah, there is that. Yeah, good point.
If you do, please send us the footage.
Yeah.
That story of the week covered for next week.
Actually, I've got one that almost as good as that. I don't know if it counts, but last Sunday, for the very first time, I went up nearly 100 foot in a cherry picker.
Ooh,
at Cirencester Church. So that was pretty. It wasn't anyone's experiment, I hasten to add.
Yeah.
But,
how does a bishop react 100 foot up a cherry picker?
Quite nervously, because I don't like heights. But it was all safe. No bishops were hurt in the experiment.
I mean, maybe that's so. I mean, this could be a Guinness World Record. Maybe we need to get in touch with them to kind of, how high has a bishop ever been in a cherry picker? And you could hold the title of the highest bishop in the cherry picker. Maybe next time you meet up with all your other bishops, you could maybe ask them.
Yeah, I'll ask them
that question and have an unofficial award given to you for that.
Good idea.
So, was this to do a little bit of masonry work on the reef, or?
That's because Cirencester Parish Church has amazingly just put in these two, sounds a bit odd, but two beautiful statues back up on their tower that went missing in the 1960s. Don't quite ask me how statues go missing, but anyway, and so I was going up there to dedicate them, so it was very good.
Oh, oh wow! Oh, so literally so you didn't sort of consider doing that on the floor before they put them up? It had to be.
I did think that would have been quite sensible. I did think that would have been quite sensible, but apparently, this made it more fun. So.
Well, no, I guess it's all good for the papers, I guess.
Yeah.
As well.
Especially if you get a world record out of it. Be well worth it then.
Oh dear. Anyway, but that's not as exciting as rhinos being hung upside down.
No, it's not really. It's quite impressive. I'd imagine it's quite nerve-wracking as a pilot to be flying around with a rhino.
Well, as an endangered species, then you are kind of risking all, aren't you? Really?
Yeah. Well, that is the story of the week. I think to draw some sort of sensible conclusion from it, the thinking behind it was this guy Robin stepped back and thought nobody had ever checked to see if this harmed rhinos, and he stepped back to think, is this the best way of doing what we're doing? And he won a prize, a spoof prize, albeit, but perhaps there's some wisdom in that, stepping back and thinking, is this the best way to do it, or is there a better way? So there is our story of the week. Hopefully it's a little bit light-hearted compared to what else has been on the news. And without further ado, Jonathan, I believe you have some questions for.
We have some hopefully quick fire or kind of semi-medium fire questions for Rachel to answer. As you know, in this slot, those who watch regularly, we try our very best within 30 seconds to ask our guests as many questions as possible. They have to answer as quickly as they can, and the unofficial winner will be the person that gets the most. Now, at the moment, our current leaderboard stands. Barry Voice, if you are watching, you are still in the lead.
No!
I hope you're watching your boss. Otherwise, maybe it'll be a pay deduction coming up.
Yeah, I've got to beat Barry.
Yeah, Barry got 7. I don't know how he did it, but he got 7. So
In
maybe
30 seconds.
Yeah, 30 seconds might be extended to beat Barry, but we shall see. Okay, so David is going to be our official timekeeper. He's there with all his technology, not a watch, but actual phone. There to the stop clock. And okay, I shall do I will not look at the camera. I will look down at my piece of paper and ask even the questions as quickly as I can. So, David, if you give me a 3, 2, 1, go, and then I shall start.
All right. You ready? 3, 2, 1, go.
Who do you admire the most?
Nelson Mandela.
What is your favourite summer activity?
Canoeing.
Who is your favourite cartoon character?
Snoopy.
If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
South Africa.
What is your dream job?
Being a bishop.
Are you a morning or night person?
Morning.
What's your favourite hobby?
Canoeing.
What's the one thing that annoys you the most?
It started, so I'll finish.
Yeah, it started, so we finished for sure.
What was it?
Thing that annoys you the most?
What annoys me the most? People moaning.
People moaning. So here we go. You answered all questions, whether they were correct or not. We actually don't really care. It's the numbers that really count. But Barry, you are now in second place.
Oh, yes!
Yeah. Your boss has beaten you. Rachel, congratulations on getting 8 in almost 30 seconds.
Yeah, I probably had a bit of a help there, but
33 seconds. But Jonathan did giggle for a little bit, so I felt like
I did. Yeah, it was the dream job. I thought, what's she going to say?
As you say, whether the answers are correct or not is neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's very true. Well, maybe is this a revelation that actually this is not your dream job you're in now?
I don't know. I've never.
Hold on. Big news. Rosemary is watching.
Oh,
yes. Well done, Rosemary. Let's hear it. Let's hear it for the girls and the women. Hurrah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you missed the first couple of minutes. We were discussing why you weren't here and saying that actually I had asked Jonathan to phone you to catch up, but no, I'm joking. I hadn't. I'm sorry we've not been in contact. Some big news, everyone. That's a shame.
Could happen whilst we're on air. You never know.
Live.
Yeah.
One born every minute.
Yeah. Well, thinking of you, Rosie.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. That's a shame. I was hoping for some really good news.
Yeah, God, come on, Rose. You've disappointed us.
Yeah, I know.
Stop giving the woman a hard time.
I know. Oh, so sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Well, Rosie, I hope you are enjoying this evening.
Yeah, feet up.
This much more enjoyable.
That husband of yours
apologize. It's a bit strange having a conversation with somebody via comments, but you don't have to apologize. It's okay. We forgive you.
Yes.
So before we annoy Rosie anymore, where are we going next with this?
I do believe I'm introducing the kind of where we're going next with our interview of our guest, of Rachel. Now, I think for us, it's us mere mortals. It's so wonderful that those up on high consider to give up their time, effort, and energy to come and speak to us. But Bishop Rachel was once a normal person as well, and we are going to find out. And dare I say this without kind of putting her down too low, kind of an ordinary person that has done some extraordinary things, and we're not just talking about being 100 foot high in a cherry picker here at all. Who knew that was in the job description at all and in the contract? 101 foot is not allowed, but 100 foot apparently is in the contract of being a bishop. But Bishop Rachel holds, if I say in a great way, a couple of wonderful titles of some firsts. And if I'm correct, Rachel, in saying this, you are the first woman bishop in the House of Lords.
Correct.
And you're also the first diocesan bishop, rather than, if the correct terminology is, assistant bishop.
Yeah, first female diocesan bishop.
Sorry, yes, no, not just the first bishop. All the other ones have been fakes and frauds till you. No, sorry, thank you for adding that. It's an important part of that. Now, so just for those who might be viewing that maybe not be familiar with kind of Anglican terminology, is it possible just to distinguish firstly what a diocesan bishop or maybe a bishop is, what a diocesan one, what an assistant one is?
I'll try and explain it very quickly. So I am called in the Church of England to lead God's people within the Anglican churches, the Church of England churches, and a diocese is a bit like a county, I guess. I mean, it depends where the different boundaries are, and so that also involves the church congregations, a number of church schools, community partnerships. So I oversee that, and there are 42 diocesan bishops in the Church of England, and then we have alongside us who are equal but work with us in a slightly different role, and what are sometimes called suffragan bishops, which are area bishops, and in this diocese, assistant bishops, and in this diocese, that is Bishop Robert, who is the Bishop of Tewkesbury, but that doesn't mean he's just in Tewkesbury. It means he works alongside me in lots of different things. So that's kind of how it works. And then there are 26 bishops who sit in the House of Lords.
Wonderful. And so it is an absolute privilege to have you with us, to be free in our conversation and where we're going this evening in just interviewing you, really. And I think so just thank you obviously for coming along and agreeing.
Great to be here.
Hopefully you'll be saying that still at the end of our time together.
I'm going to go to bed at the end.
But really what we kind of were really interested just to talk to you about, yes, obviously about being a bishop, about cherry pickers, who knew it, but also about the House of Lords and actually the importance of the role of the House of Lords in governing our country. But really kind of wanting also to spend a bit of time I wouldn't say discussing you as a person, but interviewing you and your walk with God and kind of that point of you haven't always been a Christian, and that point of conversion, discipleship, and you know how those who have walked alongside you and helped you in every stage of being a Christian, of going for ordination, being a curate, a vicar, etc., all the way to this kind of journey where you are now, really. So so yeah, it's kind of it's sort of question and answer. The conversation, as people know, will just flow where it goes. Obviously put a halt to anything that
and you might have to shut me up because I can talk for England, so.
Anything too close to the knuckle, you can shut us down for sure. So so Rachel, I mean the first question, dare I even ask this, is are you a Christian?
Did you say, am I a Christian? Yes, I am a Christian. Yes. And I'm also, Jonathan, a very normal person, because I think one of the things that's really important for me in this conversation, as I talk with people, as I do lots of different things in my role, is I always say that we are all equal. We're all created in the image of God. We're all unique people, and God's created us all different. But we have different roles that God calls us to. So when I go into schools, when I'm talking to, 4-year-olds, when I'm talking to men and women in prison, I always like to really stress we are all equal and equally loved by God, but we have different roles. So I am no more important than anyone else who's watching this or joining in. I think that's really important for me.
No, thank you. That really is, and it's not wishing to kind of to push you down, but I think it's a really great to elevate other people up, isn't it? Really on that respect.
And we're called to different roles.
No, that's right. Yes, I thought for many years my role was maybe the Archbishop Canterbury, but it seems God has other ideas on.
Yeah,
on
I think you've had a lucky escape there, if I'm honest.
probably right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, kind of your journey of faith, then.
Yeah.
Has it always involved the Anglican Church of kind of was
Yeah.
it you were a teenager, a child, a young adult?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, sometimes I wish I had one of those really dramatic stories that people have of conversion. My story is very much as a child. I can't actually remember a time in my life when I didn't see Jesus as my friend. I was brought up with Christian parents, and they used to take us to the local Church of England, local Anglican churches down the road every week, and I was part of the children's activities there. And I remember even on my first day at school, actually, you talking, David, about your daughter starting school. I remember the day I started school talking to Jesus in the playground. I can still remember that. And then I think what it's been is it's been a gradual understanding and growing. I remember when I was a teenager going on a Christian camp with other teenagers, and someone started talking to me about Jesus dying on the cross. And I thought, well, yeah, I know that. But that hadn't been the most significant thing to me. And then as this person was talking about, Jesus being able to forgive us. And I think that was the first of my teenage years of realizing that was something that I needed, and that I could be forgiven, and just learning more about God's love for me and my brokenness, and in the places where I was succeeding. And I think for me, it's just gone on from there. And I would say that now, I might be a bishop, but I go on learning and growing. I guess like any of us in our relationships with one another, you go on learning, you go on discovering more of who you are. So for me, it is a lifelong journey. But actually, my understanding of who Jesus is, my understanding of who I am as a child of God, has changed over the years. But I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't see that friendship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Did you grow up in Gloucestershire? Are you from?
No, not at all. I grew up in Hertfordshire, and then I trained as a speech and language therapist. In fact, in my story, I would say the only thing in my life that I've ever had ambition for was to be a speech and language therapist, working with children who struggled with speech or in formulating ideas through language. From about the age of 14, I wanted to be a speech and language therapist. I didn't ever want to be a teacher or a doctor. And one day someone said to me, have you thought about being a speech and language therapist? And I never heard of them. And I went along to watch one in a children's hospital. Thought, that's what I want to do. And that was my ambition. And then once I became a speech and language therapist, and I moved to London, and I worked with children, I worked for the NHS, and I worked in schools. And then when I began to get this gradual sense that God might be calling me into the church in a more full-time way, because we're all part of the church, aren't we? But in a more full-time ministering way, I really, really didn't want that. And really from that point on, I've never known what's coming next in my life. Apart from that thing of working to be a speech and language therapist, everything else in my life has just gone completely different directions. And I just, have just discovered at each point what God's calling me to, but have never had any ambitions. So to find myself in 2015 being asked if I would go for interview for this post, and in fact, I didn't come to Gloucester till the day I was announced, so I didn't even come and look round. So it was a real step of faith. So yes, I'm still learning about the Diocese of Gloucester covers Gloucestershire, part of South Gloss, a little bit of Warwickshire, a little bit of Worcestershire. So I'm still learning the geography.
Yeah. So thinking about I just had a memory of doing one of the online at school. You're kind of choosing your subjects, doing an online test to see, the top 5 of what you might be. And I think I had nurse, vet, a few other. I can just remember those two as standing out. And I think a road worker maybe was. Anyway, none of those come up. But I definitely didn't have pastor or as when you come to do your insurance forms, minister of religion is the
Yeah,
one thing you
exactly.
have to click.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did, obviously, like you said, Bishop probably didn't come up on your drop down menu. How did that end up? How did you? So I'm assuming you did curacy. Were you a
Yeah,
vicar? And then,
what's really, I mean, obviously there'll be all sorts of different views, probably even people watching, but when I had that sense of God calling me into ministry full time in the church, what was fascinating was that women couldn't actually be ordained priest in the Church of England. That's what I was ordained as. And so as I look back on that now, that's even more strange. It was only whilst I was at theological college in Oxford that General Synod, which is like the Parliament of the Church of England, finally voted for women to be able to be ordained as priests. And so I was ordained and became a curate, which is like an apprenticeship, if you like. And I worked in Islington, in a church in Islington. Then I became a vicar in Bethnal Green. And then I was asked to consider becoming what's called an archdeacon, all these different terminology. An archdeacon works with bishops and does a lot of I won't say middle management. That doesn't sound very spiritual, but it is, because it's actually the kind of organisation of people and buildings and pastoral issues. And there hadn't been, I was in London at the time, and there hadn't been any women doing those sort of roles. And it's at a time when I was just about to get married. And I just thought, and my husband was training for ministry as well. And I just thought, this is going to be really weird if he's training and I become an archdeacon. And I remember going home and showing him this job description I'd been given to consider whether I would throw my hat in the ring for this archdeacon's job. And I was going to say, no way. And he was amazing. He looked at the job description and said, don't you dare say no to considering that, because it's got your gifts in there. And there's lots we could talk about there, but I became an archdeacon in northwest London, and got married, and then 5 years later went back to the East End of London, where I'd been a vicar, and worked as an archdeacon there. And during that time, the Church of England again voted that women could become bishops. It was only in 2015 that women could become bishops. And I was actually on a trip to the Holy Land. I remember it had been snowing, and it was thick snow in January in Jerusalem.
Oh, wow.
And I got a message to say, would I be willing to be considered for this post? I've been shortlisted. Well, I didn't even know I'd been longlisted, so that was a bit of a shock. And so I said, well, send me the paperwork and I will look at it. I don't even know the Diocese of Gloucester. And when we got back to London, I looked at the paperwork and I had a sense that perhaps what they were looking for, perhaps I had something to offer. So I just threw my hat into the ring and was interviewed along with other people at Lambeth Palace, and then got a phone call to say, it's you. And that was slightly terrifying. Although at the time, you just go with it. I'm sure that everyone can just identify with those things you do in life, that you just go with it. And it's only after a while you look back and think, how did that happen? How did I cope with that? And so I came here. I was consecrated in Canterbury Cathedral in 2015, and started here in September of 2015. So been here nearly 6 years, which is incredible. And it's been a real adventure. And I've learned so much. I've learned so much about my dependence on God, because, I won't lie, it was a real step up for me. And then finding myself in the House of Lords a few weeks later. So, that real sense of having to just depend on God, and actually a real strong story for me in all of this. You might be familiar with that story in the Old Testament of when David, the shepherd boy, is anointed as king, and Samuel is called by God to go and appoint the next king after Saul. And it's a bit like the Cinderella story of the Old Testament, because Samuel goes along to meet Jesse and his sons, and he meets all these great looking sons who are tall and strong, and Samuel thinks it must be one of these, and God says, no, I don't look on the outside, I look on the heart. And eventually, you know, a bit like in the story of Cinderella, it's like, well, isn't there anyone else here? And, you know,
Yes.
says, well, there's the youngest one who's just looking out after the sheep, but you can't mean him. And actually, that is the one. And that story's been really significant to me whenever I've thought, I'm really not up to this, or there are things I really struggle with, or how can I be doing this? Is that sense of holding on to the fact that actually it's not just about what I can and can't, it's the fact that God's called me. And I think I'd say to every person who's watching this, you know, as I said at the beginning, we're all called to be the people God's created us to be, whatever that is at different times in life. And it won't always look glitzy and shiny, but it's about how are we being Christ's hope and light. And it's not about us succeeding, it's about being faithful to God. And I have to hold on to that a lot in this job.
Yeah. So as you just mentioned there, Rachel, that part of the job of being the Bishop of Gloucester comes the responsibility of sitting in the House of Lords. Kind of, I guess, there's always going to be critics, you know, kind of any age about the government and what they do and what they don't do. But just kind of quickly, just kind of, you know, if I say politely put, what's the point in the House of Lords?
Yeah, well, it's a good. It's a good question. I mean, the House of Lords is not an elected body, as you know. A group of people appointed, actually hundreds of people appointed in different ways. And within that, there are what's called the Lords Spiritual, so 26 bishops. And then there's lots of other people appointed, given jobs for all sorts of reasons, and I have some quite strong views about it. But what the House of Lords does is it really acts as a scrutiny body. So all the bills and all the business that goes through the House of Commons comes to the House of Lords, and we scrutinise it. We might make amendments to bills, suggest amendments that goes back to the House of Commons, who might accept our amendments or who might not. At the end of the day, the House of Lords doesn't push things because we're not the elected body, but I think often we're sounding a noise. We are doing that scrutiny work, and I found it a real privilege. So there's quite a few things I've been involved with. Yesterday, I think I was just saying to you before we came live on air, I was speaking on universal credit in the House of Lords, and I was part of taking a petition to Downing Street last night to persuade the government to try and keep the £20 uplift on universal credit. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, it's about making a noise and making our voices heard. There's been the domestic abuse bill recently that we have brought some amendments that have been accepted. And for me as a Christian, you know, people often say, well, Christians should stay out of politics. And I said, well, Jesus didn't stay out of politics. If politics is about the way we organise our country and our world for justice and love and mercy, then that's why I'm going to speak out. And it is a real privilege. And so I will use my voice. I will name Jesus Christ in the House of Lords. Obviously, we have to be careful because we don't. It's only the people, bishops in the Church of England who are in the House of Lords. There's all sorts of views on that. So we try and speak on behalf of people of faith as well. But it is an immense privilege, and I think it's about one way that we can be Christ's salt and light in the world.
So I've got two quick questions on the laws, and maybe sort of move on to something slightly different. So is it kind of then written in law to have that religious element? So that's fantastic, isn't it? That there is that. Dare I say the moral side?
Yes. So in the House of Lords, there are what are called the Lords Temporal, which is all the what's called the peers, and then there's the Lords Spiritual, and there are 26 Lords Spiritual, which are the two archbishops, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Archbishop of York, and then for historic reasons, the Bishop of London, the Bishop of Winchester and the Bishop of Durham, those five. And then the next 21 bishops are the longest serving bishops. And again, this was interesting how I ended up there, because just before I was appointed, Parliament, nothing to do with the Church of England, Parliament felt that under sort of equality, that it was wrong that if women were going to be able to become bishops, then it was right that they didn't wait like 100 years till they get in the House of Lords. So it was agreed that for a certain number of years, for 10 years from 2015 until 2025, if when a bishop retired, there was a female diocesan bishop, she would automatically go into the House of Lords. And that's what happened with me, because a bishop had just retired. So I'd only been the Bishop of Gloucester for a few weeks, and I was straight into the House of Lords. Whereas usually if you're a man, you've probably been a diocesan bishop for quite a while before you get into the House of Lords. So it is written into law. And the other amazing thing is that before every sitting, every afternoon, a bishop leads the house in prayer.
So I mean, I guess maybe even I didn't realise that the House of Lords are really there, really for to use the terrible phrase, really for common people to kind of really push it across, and not for government to have just their own.
I mean, you probably, some of the people in the House of Lords are probably more privileged than lots of people in the House of Commons. But actually, it is about being that scrutiny and asking hard questions. Of course, lots of people in the House of Lords were MPs, were people who've, people that you've quite famous people you've seen on your screens. But it is, what is great for me being in there is that I don't have a constituency like an MP does in the Commons, but actually as bishops, we're quite people like it when we speak, because we do bring stories from our diocese, and because we are so out there. Like this morning I was visiting YMCA and accommodation for people who are homeless. We bring stories of real lives into the House of Lords.
My other quick question: have you ever grabbed your paper and gone rah, rah, rah?
Do you know the House of Lords isn't quite like the House of Commons in that way? So we're much better behaved. There's a little bit of so sometimes I shake my head when the minister's speaking. And yesterday when I gave a little speech in this universal credit, and then they're giving the answer, and you're going, no, that's a load of rubbish, but you can't quite say that.
Oh, right. So you are very polite.
We're quite polite to one another in the House of Lords.
Fantastic.
Even though we really disagree, but there is a sense of people really disagreeing across the chamber, and different parties sit in different places, but also a real sense of friendship amongst people.
No, that's great. And actually, that can turn back into the Christian walk as well, isn't it? That actually how, as Christians, different denominations, we're going to have different opinion. And actually there's that sense that we need to be one as well, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yes, we might disagree on a few things, but actually, what we've got in common is the most important.
And I would say, for me, conflict is part of our everyday life. It's at the heart of the cross, that conflict. And I think for me, one of the greatest witnesses for us as Christians, and if you think about being in school when you disagree in things, or being in college, actually is that most people, when they disagree, walk away from one another, and they no longer are friends. And I think for us as Christians, it's about us walking towards one another. And I might disagree with Jonathan or David or something, and we can have that disagreement and be really honest with one another, and actually say, but in Christ we are one, and we have to keep that friendship. And for me, I think that's one of the greatest witnesses that Christians can offer when we disagree on things. And I think we have something to teach our world about that.
Yeah, totally. One of the things I was just wondering about is, so you mentioned about kind of bishops tend to bring a bit of kind of real life into the House of Lords, and that's something that I think, so when I talk to my friends about what I do, they all think it's kind of, you just go through, you just stand up and preach on a Sunday, and then you do this, and then you do that. They don't realise that actually, we're there at dedications and christenings, we're there at funerals. It's quite often, the first person that somebody sees after a loved one's passed away. You are at the very cutting edge of what life is. I suppose you talked about being a curate, and then vicar, and then archdeacon. And then, are there any sort of moments of any sort of moments that really stand out, that kind of stick in your memory as being really poignant or special moments that you've experienced?
Yeah, so many really. And well, you were just talking there about funerals. I can think particularly when people have had children who've died, just how hard that's been, and being alongside parents and all of that, and being able to grieve with them and weep with them. And often we haven't got the answers, and it's just it's just being alongside people in that compassion. So I think I can think of a couple of really difficult situations of families where children have died, and then you have the other extreme, don't you, of whether it's the really joyful celebrations, the weddings. I think I had the real privilege I'm showing my age now, because some people watch this won't even have been born, but in 1994, I said South Africa and Nelson Mandela in my answers to you, Jonathan. But actually in 1994, I had the privilege of being in South Africa leading up to the very first elections after apartheid, which is where white and black people had to live separately, and black people were just treated appallingly. And some of both the low things and the high things, I just think back to that time when I was with families whose children had been murdered in townships, and really difficult things. And then alongside people who were discovering that they could vote for the very first time, were discovering that they could be the people. We joked about, what's your ambition? But if you weren't able to live out that ambition, and then being with people who were then discovering, and young people who are discovering that they could have ambitions and be able to live those out. So I think it has been being alongside people in those very special. I know I've done lots of things where I've been, seemingly at significant, events and being with royalty and things, but actually it's the being with people in the everyday stuff of life where for me that pain of Jesus' crucifixion and the joy of Jesus' resurrection dwell together, and where we can be those people of hope. And I think it's probably those things. And I'll finish this call and I'll think of all the hundreds of things that I would have said. What I could say is, can I do a shameless plug?
Please.
If you read my book called Encounters, that it's full of stories of me reflecting on where Jesus met people in the stories we hear in the Gospels, and me reflecting on my own life. And some of those stories of sadness and happiness are in there. So you'll have to buy the book. It's very easy reading.
Yeah. So as you hold the book up there, your surname.
Yeah.
Now, TRE to begin with, is that Tree, or is it Trey as in Dr. Dre?
Treweek, like the week, but Treweek. Yeah, my husband. It comes from apparently the Isles of Scilly. So my husband's family many moons ago were from the Isles of Scilly. He's actually from the East End of London, but
the past 6 years I've wondered however to say that surname.
Yeah, do you know, it's very funny when you do media interviews and suddenly the person realizes they didn't ask you beforehand, and they go, "I'd like to introduce the Right Reverend Rachel
Treweek, right? So it's not as in Dr. Dre.
No.
Yeah. So I kind of, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe talk one of the questions. So talking about how to pronounce your surname, how do you describe your job to people? So this is where this question comes from. So I'm moving back to Scotland, as I think we know, and some of the viewers know, and I'm connecting up with some people that I was friends with at school and before I moved down, and they kind of go, "No, what job are you moving up for?" And so I'm going to be a pastor of a church. And when people are replying on WhatsApp and it comes up with so and so is typing ... and it's like that for a good 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then they just text, "Great, thumbs up." And I suppose I'm thinking of young people thinking of their first week at school, maybe at a new school. Somebody says, "Oh, you've been at church on Sunday," or where did you do on Sunday? I was at church, and I think, for some people, it's such, going to church is such an alien thing, let alone,
Yeah.
being a pastor or
Yeah.
being a bishop. Do you have any, when you speak to your friends or people that maybe you went to school with, connect up with, I don't know if people do, are reunions a thing? Do people do school reunions? Anyway, how do you kind of describe that? How do you
And I think it's also difficult if people sort of almost think like it's having become a bishop, when people do think, oh, it's some ambition, you've got up the pole to be something really important in the Church of England. And I think I always want to start a bit like where we started this conversation, to say, first and foremost, I am Rachel Treweek, who's a disciple of Jesus Christ. And as bishop, yes, I am leading and overseeing what goes on in our churches. But I think, again, people have a view, don't they, that church is all about what we do on Sunday. So people often, I don't know if they say that to you, but often think that ministers, pastors, because only ever work on a Sunday and that's all you do. Whereas actually, for me, it's about enabling. So all the people who are watching this call, I would say what really matters to me is what it means for us to be the church Sunday through to Saturday. If actually we were living out what it means to be Christ followers every day of every week, this world would be transformed. But we've got very hooked up on using the word church to be what we do when we gather together. That might be Sunday morning, it might be, I don't know, Wednesday evening, whenever you gather, even gathering on a call like this. And yet, actually, all of that should be enabling us to give God glory, to go on discovering who we are and who God is in our teaching, in our prayer, in our scripture, so that we're then sent out to be that church in our schools, in our homes, in our shops, on our sports fields, in our hospital waiting rooms. And I think that's something I like talking about a lot, and saying that as bishop, that's what I wanted. I want to enable Christ Church to be the church. A lot of what I do is community engagement, being with people who are not Christians, but who are doing, involved in that work that we would say is all part of God's transformation. So as I say, today, being on a, with a YMCA place and talking about homelessness, and what part of my role actually is to be bishop to the prisons across England and Wales, just a little job that I have added on. But actually I feel passionate about that because in criminal justice and how we're working for transformation. And so what really interests me with people who are watching or linking this is that, as a young person, I don't know what the future holds for you. I pray lots of good things. There'll be the pain and the sadness as well. And in all of that, God won't let you go. And actually, in all of that, what does it mean that we're being honest about the pain, honest about the joy, so that we can, in how we live, how we talk, be Christ's church Sunday right through to Saturday. And that's what gets me out of bed in the morning as a bishop, to say I want to join in with what God is doing in bringing God's kingdom on earth as in heaven. And I know that one day, it is mystery, but I know that one day all things will be made new. I really believe that there will come a day when there'll be no more tears, no more pain, and Christ will come again. I don't know what that's going to be like, but I know I'm called to join in with the signs of that being seen now, however small they are, whether it's that kind word that you as a young person come alongside a friend at school tomorrow, how you live with your pain or your anxiety. And that's what I feel as a bishop I'm called to do. And it's why as a bishop, my last thing to say is why as a bishop, I carry what's called a crozier, like a shepherd's staff. And it's to remind me that I'm there to care for Christ's flock, for the people of Christ, but also I myself am one of that flock. And it's both those things. That probably doesn't answer your question, but that's what I feel passionate about.
Yeah, it's great. And it really links into our verse of the week, or verses of the week. I was thinking similar lines of those kind words at school, just the glimpses of the character of Jesus coming through us. And I was thinking to when I was at school, and I probably wasn't a particularly nice, particularly great at that all of the time. I didn't always, I wasn't always the nicest person, believe it or not. Hard to believe, I know. And one of the things that really challenged me was reading Romans and also James. It was, you mentioned earlier, Rachel, about talking to somebody and realizing that you needed to be forgiven. And books like Romans and books like James really are a bit of a punch in the stomach sometimes when you're burying your own, what you do. And James, one of the things that really came out strongly for me in James was James 3. I've got this on two different things because it's too long to come up, but James 3, 17 and 18, and just thinking about the kind of person that you want to be at school this week or in work or in wherever. And it says the wisdom from above. So you mean the wisdom from God is, first of all, pure. It is peace-loving, gentle at all times, and willing to yield to others, something that we're not always great at. It is full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism and is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about that earlier about, when we're going about our daily lives of trying to sow seeds of peace, and we'll harvest righteousness at the end of it, and being full of mercy and full of fruit of good deeds, and peace loving, gentle at all times. And I think particularly if you find going back to school or going back to work stressful, it can be difficult to do those things, but it's wisdom from above, wisdom from God that allows us to do it. That enables us to make those right choices, do as Christ would have done. So that is our verse of the week, and we are very quickly approaching 10 o'clock. So Jonathan, over to you for our final.
Yes. So very, very quickly. So to sum up a little bit, in what we have learnt this evening, we learnt that David became very emotional with his daughter starting school this week, and has been comforted by his wife, all those tears that he shed with his little girl growing up and becoming a schoolgirl. And we learnt as well that Rachel wears glass slippers as well. Now you might yes, thank you, good. So if you're wondering what on earth I'm on about, you have to rewind or watch it again when it's on YouTube, and see the comment about Cinderella that Rachel made to link all that up. And I think Jonathan has realized, speaking in the third person, that he doesn't really want to become a bishop or an archbishop or anything with any responsibility, I think. And definitely I don't want to try to hang a rhino upside down, whether it's fully breathing or whether it's being darted to put to sleep. I think I'll leave that to Dr. Rob, whatever his name was, to do that. Just to really finally finish up, next time we have been doing it fortnightly. We're going to move now to monthly. Our next time we're going to be coming together is going to be the 8th of October, 9 o'clock. And David is going to be our guest. Now, for David to be our guest, we are going to need some hosts to host alongside me. So I'm looking for 2 volunteers. Doesn't matter if you're young or slightly older, although if you are under 18, obviously we need parental consent, etc., upon all that. So if you want to interview David on his time in the Forest of Dean, his time in Gloucestershire, moving back, and most importantly, to quiz him over his influence to you in Branch. Has it been a blessing? No, we're not going to go there. We're not going to go there. But Branch in person is coming back this year. And we are so excited that on the, all going well, that is, depending upon what actually happens. But the 4th of December is going to be our first in-person Branch event for about 21 months. So we're really excited about that. We're going to get the publicity out, venue-wise and everything else, to where and when that is going to happen. And we'd love you all to to come back and be involved in that. And if you've never been to Branch before, you are more than welcome to come and join us in that as well. So I think that's probably everything. Again, just to say, thank you very much. to Bishop Rachel for joining us, a very ordinary, extraordinary person. And we want to just pray for you that God, by his Holy Spirit, really continue to bless you in all that you're doing and the vital work in giving God glory.
Thank you.
Whether it's up a cherry picker in the House of Lords or at YMCA's championing homeless people, prisons, etc. So, yeah, we just want to lift you up and just pray that God will really bless you. David, is that everything I've covered?
Yeah, you've covered everything. Well done. Thank you again, Rachel, for
joining.
It's been really
fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you to all those who are watching and joining in. And God bless you in being who you are, with that wonderful verse from James, just to remind us that that's what we're called to be and do.
Yeah. And just one final comment. We can't leave without saying thank you to Rosie for watching the whole way through. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. And we will finish there, because Rachel told us beforehand she's been up since 5 this morning. I get up at 5, but that's because my children force me to get up. Rachel does it by choice. So we are going to sign off and let Rachel get some rest. So thank you very much for being with us, Rachel. Thank you for watching, everyone.
You.
And we will
Brilliant.
see you in 1 month's time, everyone.
Bye.